Good morning, 7 East. It is Wednesday, my dudes. This edition of Free LEPRE Radio, 27th episode. A lot of fondness in my heart, the number 27, because I was born on the 27th day of a month. We are on the air, and today is an action-packed and info-packed episode for you. Two content-related things on our agenda today. Americans keep moving west. Second, the Texas Revolution. It's about Texas accent. Sandy Cheeks, Texas accent. And number 3, sports news. Fun segment of the day. Sports news never stops either. So this is where we are on Wednesday. You have no new assignment. You still have American land expansion questions. If you already did the assignment, today we'll add just more information and more detail and hopefully give you something to look up that I find pretty interesting. And that is the Alamo and the whole topic of Texas independence. So let's go back to what we've looked at so far. So when we did Andrew Jackson, one of the big things in his presidency was Indian removal, the Indian Removal Act. And as you can see on the map on the left of the screen, these Native American tribes were forced by the military to move west of the Mississippi River, and they're supposed to relocate to this Indian territory, which is mostly modern-day Oklahoma. And the assumption is that, okay, their land's being taken from them, which is horrible and sad, but they're being kind of told that, all right, you're going to have land here to stay on and no one's going to push you off. Well, that doesn't happen either, because even after the Trail of Tears and the thousands that died on the way to this territory, settlers keep moving west. Remember, the Louisiana Purchase, that land is still open. Settlers aren't really going to care about what the government has set aside or claimed to have set aside for Native Americans, so they're going to keep moving west. Not just moving west into territory owned by the United States, but territory that is not owned by the United States. And that brings us to this next topic, the Texas Revolution. So previously on 7th grade social studies, the United States was expanding westward and adding lots of land. You can see in this map these states that are being added, but also the Louisiana Territory, now called the Missouri Territory, that has not been organized into states yet. Also in the top left, you'll see the Oregon Territory. That is a piece of land that the USA and Britain disagree about who owns. The United States claims they own all of it. Britain claims they own all of it. They're going to have to work something out, or we're going to have a third war with Britain. Imagine that. 1830, this is what the United States looked like. And what happens at this point is that many settlers are actually going to move to Mexico. So Mexico wins its independence from Spain in 1821. They have a very long Mexican War for Independence, but they win their independence in 1821. And at that point, a lot of American settlers who want to leave the United States and kind of start fresh end up immigrating to Texas, which is one of the northeastern regions or states of Mexico at this point. You can see this arrow here. So many of these settlers coming to Texas are actually American citizens who are moving to Texas. Texas and Mexico was a very popular destination for Americans because it offered them a new start in a new country. You may not think about it this way, but because people think the Southwest is all desert, but Texas actually has some really good farmland, especially in the northeastern part where people were immigrating to. Now, many of these American settlers were people who had owed money in America. They wanted to leave and start fresh somewhere else. So let's say you got into some debt back in the United States, and instead of like going to jail or being kind of forced to pay it, you just go to a new country, start over, start fresh, a new opportunity. And that's what many settlers did when they moved to Mexico, specifically the region of Texas. But within a short time, the number of former American citizens in Texas actually outnumbered the people who were born there in Mexico in many regions when Mexico was still part of Spain. And that's going to present some issues. So, kind of sidestepping and talking about some Mexican history at this point, 1835, after a period of unrest in Mexico, it's a very similar period to what America experienced under the Articles of Confederation, where the government was having a lot of problems. The Mexican government passed a new constitution, kind of like we passed a new constitution. But their new constitution was very different. They eliminated the idea of states entirely. So remember, our constitution, we didn't eliminate states, we just took a lot of power away from them. This new constitution in Mexico just removed the idea of states. So Mexico's original constitution had states just like the United States does, that have their own powers and responsibilities, just like we have governors and state laws and things like that. But this change for Mexico meant that all the power now belonged to the central government under the leadership of President and General Antonio López de Santa Anna. This would be like if a change to the U.S. Constitution eliminated the 50 states, we got rid of all 50 governors and state legislatures, and every single decision was just made from Washington, D.C. That's what was going on in Mexico. And you can imagine that if you were someone who had a leadership position in one of these states of Mexico, you would not be very happy. So several of the Mexican states rebelled against this new constitution since it took away their power and basically erased them from the map as separate communities, separate smaller governments. Some of the rebelling states just wanted to return to the earlier constitution, while others thought about complete independence. Texas was one of the states that joined the rebellion against Santa Anna's new government and constitution and tried to become an independent country. This begins what is known as the Texas Revolution, and here we have a primary source historical photograph of a Texas rebel preparing to saddle up and fight for independence. Sandy Cheeks, very famous Texas revolutionary. But other states and provinces, you might say, in Mexico actually rebelled as well. And Santa Anna is going to have to go around putting down these rebellions, but eventually he's going to get to Texas. So to put down the rebellion, Santa Anna marched north into Texas with an army of over 4,000 soldiers. The Texians, as they called themselves, tried to gather an army to fight back, and they used an old mission built by Spain called the Alamo as a makeshift fortress to defend against Santa Anna's army. The Texians couldn't amass an army equal in size to fight back, and the Alamo was left with only 200 defenders facing off against Santa Anna's thousands. And you might recognize the building if you don't know the story. The building, just the way it looks, is kind of famous. This is the chapel at the Alamo. It's the most well-known building in a compound that is actually much larger. You can fit a few hundred people in there. But they use it as a fort, and it's only 200 defenders against thousands. And the ensuing Battle of the Alamo, that gets cemented into history. The 200 defenders hold off Santa Anna's army for 13 days. They're waiting to be helped by a Texian army that never comes. Texas is scrambling to try to get soldiers together, but they can't get them together in time. And every Texan defender was killed in the battle except for one, Captain Juan Seguin, who was sent out on a mission as a messenger to get word out to the rest of the Texas Revolution about what was going on. And although the Alamo was a loss for Texas, the rebels were inspired by their courage and sacrifice, and they would yell, "Remember the Alamo," as their war cry in later battles. Have you ever heard that phrase? That's where it comes from. There were a lot of famous people who died at the Alamo, including the person, if you see in this painting, with the rifle in his hand, swinging it like a club. That is the famous frontiersman and pioneer Davy Crockett, also a congressperson at one point, but he's known for all of his exploits in nature. Also the inventor of the Bowie knife, Jim Bowie, who was at the Alamo and died there. And the commander as well was Colonel Travis, who was also one of the early heroes of Texas. It was an interesting story. Two really good movies made about it, one in 1961 and 2004. I like them both, but I kind of like the 2004 version better. And I'm going to try to include some videos about it in a post on Classroom in case you're interested. But to make a long story short, I know it's too late. The rebels eventually defeat and capture Santa Anna after their victory at the Battle of San Jacinto. Santa Anna agrees to grant Texas its independence in order to be released. Texas then becomes its own country, the Republic of Texas. And here we have the famous painting of a wounded and captured Santa Anna agreeing to Texas independence after the Battle of San Jacinto. And here we have the flag of Texas. That was its national flag. It's now its state flag. They had their own government, their own currency, their own borders. As you can see here, they claimed everything that is yellow and disputed territory. So Texas believed they had all of that. Mexico believed they had the green part. But they become their own country until 1845, when America annexed or forcibly added Texas to the United States. There was a lot of support inside Texas for annexation, but even more support inside the United States of America to add Texas to the Union of States. Later on, Texas would vote to make their annexation official. But there is kind of a problem with this. And that problem is, this made Mexico angry. Since they never accepted Texas's independence, the government didn't really consider Santa Anna's deal legit. So they kind of canceled that. But Texas didn't, of course, acknowledge that. Moreover, even if they did accept it, there was this space in the middle, where you see here, this little green part, that both sides believed they owned. So America believed that this was part of Texas that they annexed. Mexico said, no. That was never part of Texas. That's still ours. Texas is only this yellow part in the middle. Border disagreements often lead to war, and that is exactly what happens in 1846. More on that subject tomorrow. We're going to have a little documentary clip on the Mexican-American War that results in America basically adding the entire southwest of the United States, including this disputed territory. That does it for our content for the day. Now on to sports news. So I'm going to include some other video clips about Texas and the Alamo on Classroom. If you're interested, you can check those out. But now we have some sports news. Sports news update, number 1. Kind of a semi-older story, but one that I found hilarious all the same. Tom Brady accidentally trespasses inside Tampa Bay home. So this is not The Onion. This is not fake news. This actually happened. Tom Brady was trying to visit one of his new coaches. But of course, being in Florida now and not in Massachusetts, he doesn't know the area that well. And it turned out that he ended up parking in the wrong driveway and just entered into somebody's home. Doors were unlocked. I don't know why. It's Florida. I guess you can expect that sort of thing. But he goes in and he sees someone he doesn't recognize. They have this awkward exchange, and then he leaves and goes next door. So imagine that. I hope they did not let him leave without an autograph. That would have been probably kidnapping, actually, technically. Story number 2. ESPN turning into the Ocho for a special broadcast on Saturday. Now, this reference might not resonate with many of you, but there was once this very old comedy movie called Dodgeball, and in that movie, which is pretty good, there is a fake ESPN network called ESPN 8, the Ocho, and on that network they air all of these weird sports, like Dodgeball, even though it's not a weird sport, but they air it on TV. Dodgeball, lawnmower racing, and other crazy things that don't really get broadcast on TV. But apparently ESPN, because of the quarantine and lack of stuff on TV, they are going to air, as if they were ESPN 8, the Ocho, and air things like Dodgeball, and other crazy sports as well. This Saturday, I'll be tuning in, maybe usual as well. And lastly, some new sports are filling in the void left by there being no professional sports leagues. Toilet paper dodgeball and themed dinners, how bored families are surviving the coronavirus lockdown. So I just learned about this. Apparently there's toilet paper dodgeball. You go into your home, you have several rolls of toilet paper, turn off the lights, and blindfold yourself, even though that seems redundant. And you throw toilet paper rolls randomly. And if you get hit, you're supposed to be out. But if everyone's blindfolded and it's dark, I don't see how they're going to police this. I guess it's the honor system, the honor roll. High-level humor right there. But toilet paper dodgeball, I guess you have some rolls to spare. You can play that. I don't think I'll be playing it, though. That does it for sports news. And that does it for this day's episode of LEPRE Radio. You have your assignments still to do if you haven't done it yet. New assignment coming tomorrow. And on Friday, we have our GimKit summing up information from the week in the competitive game of freezing, gift-giving, music-changing fun. See you next time. Mr. LEPRE signing off.